Home inspection contingencies. If you are selling your house, those are three of the most frightening words that you can hear because there's so much mystery. This is where so many real estate transactions seem to fall apart, is during the home inspection contingency. So in this video, I'm going to unpack what you as a seller should expect during a home inspection contingency. What are some things that you can do in advance to help prepare for it? What are some things that you can do after you receive requests from your buyer? And just how do you navigate the tumultuous waters of the inspection contingency? My name is Nick Offenkamp. I am the leader of the Tartan Team with Real Broker. We are here to make real estate transactions as stress-free as possible, and we also like making them enjoyable. We like having fun. So if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in Clark County, hey, I'd like to think I'm your guy. So go ahead and get in touch with me. We can talk about anything that you'd like, but not in this video. In this video, we're talking about home inspection contingencies from the perspective of the seller. Now, if you're unfamiliar, what is a home inspection contingency? Well, most buyers who make an offer on your house are going to have an inspection contingency. This is something that every good real estate agent is going to recommend to their clients because it is an important part of due diligence in making sure that as a buyer, you are fully aware of what's going on with the house. It makes sense that people want this, but from the seller's perspective, it can be a little bit unnerving because it means that somebody is going to be coming into your home with the sole purpose of finding all of its hidden faults. And then usually the buyer is going to take that list, they're going to make some selections from it, and they're going to come back to you as the seller and they're going to say, hey, we found these issues and we want for you to deal with them, either by having a licensed contractor come out and fix it, or by making a seller concession, reducing the purchase price. Whatever it is, there's a number of different things that buyers will request, and as a seller, you ought to be prepared for both receiving that and knowing how you're going to respond. Now, when it comes to home inspectors and home inspection contingencies, just know that even if it's a brand new custom built home that, one individual pounded every single nail into the house and they did as perfect of a job as could possibly be imagined, a home inspector is still going to find faults with that home. That's their job after all. They're getting paid good money to spend a few hours at the house to find faults with it. And how disappointed would you as a buyer be if after all of that time, the inspector said, there's nothing here, nothing wrong? That would be greatly disappointing. So as a seller, you should know that home inspectors are going to be kind of ticky-tacky. There's going to be things that they call out that are frankly kind of silly, like they're not real issues. Like, I've had them call out like nail heads that are sticking out, 1/8 of an inch past the gutter. And it's like, really, is that going to affect your enjoyment of or ability to live in the home? Probably not. But it proves the point of that home inspectors, they've got to find something. So just know as the seller that even if you feel like you've done all the maintenance you could possibly do on your house, there's still going to be stuff that shows up on the report. Now, how much the buyer asks for really depends a lot on their personality as well as the guidance that they're getting from their agent and how to negotiate the home. Hopefully, they look at those little things like the nails that are sticking out 1/8 of an inch too far and they say, not a big deal. Some buyers are not that cool and they do try to go after the little minutia. Hopefully that won't be the case for you. Some of the bigger things that will come up from time to time on a home inspection are evidences of there being leaks in the roof or standing water in a crawl space, or evidence of what they call organic growth, which is their polite way of saying, hey, we think there might be mold in the attic or in the crawl space, but they can't say mold because they're not certified mold specialists. There are also, perhaps they find something with the foundation, or there could be any number of much larger things that they find that they report back to the buyer that could potentially be either deal breakers for the buyer or could be very costly requests to you for the buyer to move forward. As the seller, what are some things that you can do to prepare for the home inspection? Before the home inspection, before your home even goes under contract, there are some good things that you can do, keep in mind. It may well be worth having a pre-inspection done on your home. They're generally $300 to $500 depending on the size of your house, but that just has a home inspector come out on your behalf to find out, okay, what's going on with this house. And it's going to save you from a lot of surprises, because they might reveal that there's a major leak in the roof or that there's issues going on down in the crawl space. And the nice thing about them discovering that for you is that it gives you the opportunity to remedy those things before even taking your house to market, and seriously reduces the risk of having a big costly expense come out of a buyer, or potentially have the buyer find something that's going to blow the deal up. You don't want that. You don't want your house to go pending and then for a buyer to back out 2 weeks later on an inspection contingency, and then you've got to go back to market again. You lost a ton of momentum in that. It's just never an ideal situation. And so that can be the real benefit of having a pre-inspection done on the home. And if you feel real good about the pre-inspection, you can even turn that over to potential buyers to show, hey, look how clean the house is, or hey, here's an issue with the roof that they caught, and here's the contractor that we had to come out and make the repair, and now you got no more worries. So a pre-inspection is something that you can do. The downside to that is that anything that the home inspector discovers, if they discover that there is a lot of water or evidences of like flooding in the crawl space, then those are things that you would need to disclose. If there's a leak in the roof that was discovered, you would need to disclose that as well. So do the pre-inspection if you have the reserves to be able to make some repairs up front. If you don't have reserves to make those repairs, or you don't want to, then I would not recommend the pre-inspection. In that case, to some degree, ignorance is bliss for you, because you only have to disclose what you are objectively aware of. Next step, you're in contract. The new homeowner, the buyer, they do have a home inspection, and you get requests back from the buyers. What do you do? Well, this is where a good agent is going to walk you through your options. Most of the time, if it's a major repair like roofing or replacing trim that's rotted around windows, or let's just say the oven isn't working properly and it might need to be replaced, or there's issues with HVAC, those can all be real costly concerns, and most buyers are going to state that any repairs need to be done by a licensed contractor, which means that no matter how handy or DIYer you are, the new homeowner doesn't want you doing it, so it's going to cost you to have somebody come out. And this is where it's helpful to have a realtor that has great connections with local trades, contractors, specialists that will be able to come out very quickly to give you a bid on how much the job is going to cost and how quickly they can get it done. Will almost certainly get you the best deal by working with somebody that your realtor has a relationship with, but maybe you have relationships with business owners in the community. First and foremost though, you're going to want to get bids to figure out what is the dollar value that the buyer is requesting. From there, you're going to try and think through, well, what's a reasonable request? And honestly, this is a hard thing to figure out, because reasonable is different for each individual. We'd have 6 billion or 7 billion different definitions of reasonable if we asked every person on the earth. But there are some kind of general consensus things that a home, unless otherwise disclosed or it's a distress sale or sold as is, a home should be readily enjoyable from day one without there being massive concerns of structural issues, safety issues. Basically think about it in the standpoint of treat others the way that you would want to be treated. When you buy a new home, what are the things that you would expect the sellers to do for you versus what are the things that you would expect are going to be fine, for sellers to not address? And that kind of helps create categories for, okay, here's reasonable requests from the buyers versus things that are just silly. With your agent, you'll determine, okay, what are the things that we're going to consider saying yes to, and what are the things that we're just immediately going to strike and say, no, we're not going to do that. Once you've determined what it is that you may be willing to cover, then you're going to take the bids that you have on all of that, and you're going to figure out, okay, do I want to do all of that myself prior to closing? Or let's just say that the total bids add up to about $6,000 or $7,000. Do you want to go back to the buyer and say, hey, we understand, we see that it's reasonable that you're requesting some of these repairs. We want to move forward with the deal, but we don't want to do the work. We think that you'll be happier if you hire your own contractors, and therefore we're going to give you a $7,000 seller credit. You okay with that? That's a reply, a totally legitimate reply that you could make to a buyer. Really, your options to the buyer once they've made their requests are to say, yes, we'll do everything, or we will do some of the work, or we will do none of the work, but we'll give you a credit, or we'll do none of the work and we're not going to give you any sort of a credit. Now, what sort of risk do you take on with any of those potential responses? Now, if you say yes to everything, then that contingency is satisfied. The buyer has to move forward and waive the contingency. If you say yes to everything that they've requested, they have no legal recourse to back out on grounds of the inspection contingency. If you say yes, but we're not going to do everything, or yes, but we're only going to give you a credit, well, in that case, the buyer has the opportunity to respond. So if you accept all of their requests, the contingency is waived, the buyer has to move forward, or at least they can't back out on the grounds of the inspection contingency. With all of the other options, if you say, we'll do some of the work, or we will give you a credit, or we're not going to do any of the work or offer any credits, well, then it goes back to the buyer. The ball is in their court to decide how they're going to proceed. They can either accept the terms that you've offered and waive the inspection contingency, or they can terminate the agreement, get their earnest money back, and your house goes back on the market. So that's where there's the tension, where you're really, it can feel like rolling the dice on, okay, what do we give? What do we not give? And what's the buyer going to do in response? Now, my recommendation is always to give as much as is reasonable. I've seen buyers ask for crazy things, and I will be the first one to tell you of, hey, that is crazy. That is not reasonable. You don't need to do that. But I'm also going to tell you when the buyer makes requests, hey, this is actually something that I would request if I was a buyer, or I don't think this is crazy. I do think that any other buyer out there is going to want this same repair or would make the same request. I'm going to tell you that because at the end of the day, what is the goal? The goal is to sell your house. And now you have your house in contract. You're so close to waiving the one real difficult contingency, which is the inspection contingency. And so my encouragement to you is most likely going to be, you should give as much as you can in as much as it's reasonable to do so. Because while in your mind you may think, well, we'll just go back to the market and get another buyer, it's not always that easy, and that's just me being honest with you. Once a house goes back on the market, again, you've lost so much of that momentum, and maybe you had other interested parties, but in the 10 days or so from the time you accepted the offer to now when the buyer potentially terminates it, well, those other buyers have moved on. They've found other homes. They've ruled yours out in their hearts and in their minds. So don't, lean on this idea that, well, there'll just be another buyer out there, unless of course you have a legitimate backup offer, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. So point being that it's far better to keep the one buyer you have with the terms that you've accepted, that you're good with, and try and find a way forward with them however possible. But the reality is sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes a buyer is just too unreasonable in their requests and it doesn't make sense to move forward. And so I, as your agent, will help you establish what is that limit, what is that threshold where it either does or doesn't make sense to move forward or to give anymore. Once the buyer and seller have agreed to how to move forward with the inspection contingency, whether it's the yes, we'll do it all, we'll do some, we'll give you a credit, or we're not doing anything, well, at that point, once the agreement's made, that contingency is waived, and it should be pretty darn smooth sailing from there. Hopefully that breaks down the inspection contingency for you. Hopefully it makes it a little bit less scary. So in summary, consider having a pre-inspection done before your house goes on the market, especially if you have the means to make some repairs. This is going to mitigate surprises and help reduce the risk of a buyer rescinding on account of the inspection contingency. If at all possible to avoid that, that's the best thing to do. Once the buyer has had their inspection and you're getting the report back, think through, okay, what's a reasonable request and what isn't? What would I want done in the home that I'm moving into next versus, what's something that's just, I'm not going to, repair that little tiny scuff in the baseboard, or maybe you will because it's such a simple thing. Regardless, I will help you to work through what that is, and then it's back to negotiation. And a good agent is going to develop good rapport with the other agent, is going to work their darndest to negotiate well, to represent you in the very best possible light, to show your superior reasonableness and the rationality and why you're saying yes to some things and no to others, or why you're offering a credit, or why you're saying no altogether. That's something that a good agent is going to help you do, and they're not going to apply pressure to you to, keep coming down, keep making reductions, because, all they're worried about is their commission. A bad agent does that. That's not who you want to work with. So again, I come back to the point, if you are looking to sell a home in Clark County, well, hey, I'd like to consider myself in that group of good agents who's going to look out for you and your best interests and reduce the stress of the transaction as much as possible. It's at least worth us having a conversation. And if you want to learn more about, well, what does it look like to list a home with Nick and the Tartan team, hey, there's a video for that, and I'll link to it in the description below, which is also where you can find all of my contact details so that we can get in touch. Or just leave a comment. I reply to everything there. So if you've got more questions, comments, thoughts, a crazy story about an inspection contingency, hey, I'd love to hear it. So drop it down below, leave a like, subscribe, and I will be back with you very soon.